Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to look at some examples of silicates. So silicates, remember, make up the majority of rocks on Earth, and they're made up of silicon and oxygen in little pyramid shapes. So those pyramid shapes can either be individual or be linked together in chains or put together two-dimensionally in sheets or three-dimensionally in other matrix structures. You can also interact these with other materials. So other metals can be used as coloring inside, and so you can have various colors of quartz, for instance, depending on what element is essentially staining that mineral. You can also have configurations of, say, one layer of a silicate with another layer of another element. So like an aluminum oxide, I have an example of one of those, to where it's just one layer after another of different types of minerals. So all of these. So I think this is a rather easy lecture because I can't expect you to know it all. So it's one of those that if you're going to learn it completely, it would take a tremendous amount of work to do an overview, as long as you're not trying to categorize in your mind every little nuance. It really is not that hard of a lesson, because in this case we're really just looking at the colors of the silicates. Remember, a silicate is just two elements. It's silicon and oxygen together, and if you have other elements introduced, those other elements can change the color, the appearance, all of the properties that we've looked at before. So the first one we're going to look at is the light material, so the light silicates, and these are your feldspars. The feldspar in this is the tan-colored rock on the far right. It's one of the components of granite, so I put a picture there for you. Quartz, which is the glossy white and pink shiny glassy parts of the granite. Muscovite, which is one that makes sheets. It cuts in sheets, like little sheets of glass. And then clay, we're going to see that as rocks break down, they will continue to break down into the smallest parts that they can, and often if it's a silicate rock that's breaking down, you're going to break it down into the tetrahedrals, and so you'll have these individual tetrahedrals that can get into the soil, and that would retain water, and we call it clay. So these various stains that make them different colors can be mostly metals, aluminum and potassium, things on the left side of the periodic table, calcium, sodium, and lots of others as well. So let's look at the first group just a little bit more, the feldspars. The feldspars are found in all types of rocks. So they are found in igneous rocks, which melt underground. They're found in sedimentary rocks as rocks wear down and then are basically pressed into new types of rocks, and metamorphic rocks, which are also underground and under high stress. They have a specific crystal. If you remember that minerals, as a definition, has a specific crystal shape, and this one has a 90-degree cleavage line. It's a mid to hard range crystal with a Mohs scale of 6 out of 10. And then, depending upon the introduced element, the other type of metal that's involved would be the different classes. So you can have potassium feldspar would have potassium in it, okay? Plagioclase feldspar has others like sodium or calcium or other things in it. So there's different classifications based upon these other metals that are introduced into these silicate structures. Another light one that a lot of people can recognize is quartz. It has a glassy, lustrous, like a vitreous type of luster, so it looks like glass. Sometimes it can be transparent type of glass, others stained but still translucent. You can see light through it. Others a more milky or a brownish, smoky type of thing, depending upon what other elements are introduced into that matrix. So quartz is rather hard with a 7, so quartz can scratch a lot of things, and they have points. So if you can look at the rose quartz here, you can see just the beginnings of little pencil points as that crystal was growing inside what I assume would be a geode of some sort. Muscovite also is a light mineral. It's one of the micas, and the micas form sheets, and you can split them into, it looks like little sheets of plastic or little sheets of paper or little microscope cover slides or something like that, where they're very, very thin, and they just kind of spread out like a deck of cards. When it breaks down, clay is usually what you're going to see as silicates break down. They break down into the little pyramid shapes, and then those clays are one of the most abundant in the soil, and in fact is necessary for growing plants, etc. You have to have a little bit of water retention, and that clay absorbs water great. So here's an example of these sheet silicates. So you see the muscovite on the left, where it has weak bonds indicated in the red dots and strong bonds in the blue dots. So when, like a knife would be all it would take to split 2 layers of rock from each other. You wouldn't need a sledgehammer or anything like that. It would just shatter along those little thin, they would just snap off like little crackers. Kaolinite, I'm put a bad picture here. This is also in like a deck of cards, but it's a little bit different. You're going to have layers of the silicate structure with an alternate layer of something else. So in this case, it's like an aluminum oxygen structure, and it just goes one to the next to the next to the next, back and forth between these 2 alternate oxygen groups. Now we'll look at the dark ones. Dark ones usually have some kind of a harder metal in it, or a more dense metal, specifically iron. There's lots and lots of iron in the Earth's crust. And so magnesium or iron, if these metals are tinting or tainting the silicate crystal, then you're going to have deeper colors. And so here are some examples of deeper colors. The garnet may be the one you would know the best. It's a gemstone, or at least a semi-precious gemstone. I think it's the January birthstone. Olivine, I've talked about before. It's a deep green color. And then a lot of these would be blackishes, or a black green or black brown, the Pyroxenes, the amphiboles. So they're dense and they're heavy for their volume, because it has heavy elements in it, like iron, which is very heavy. So I talked about olivine. It's glassy, and it's deep green. And in fact, it's in a lot of, it doesn't always look like a gemstone, even though you can have examples that would be beautiful. These are in cliff faces and rock formations. So it's a deep greenish brown type of rock. Pyroxenes are also dark. They're opaque. You can't see through them. They're black. A lot of these will all have crystal structures, differing crystal structures. This example is 90. Hornblende at the bottom, which is one of the components of granite, has not straight 90-degree splits, but their cleavage lines are on 60 and 120. So you end up with kind of, it looks like one of your pink erasers that kind of has a wedge shape on the ends. Okay, so they are also very, very common dark examples of these silicates. Okay, so here's some examples of the ones we just looked at. So hornblende is the black speckles in quartz, and here's an example of peridite. I think peridite is the birthstone of August, if I'm not mistaken. So it has lots of olivine in it. That's what the green part is. And then the speckles are these other darker silicates involved as well. Biotite's another example of the mica that's split into sheets, and garnet is usually a deep red, or an orange red, or a brown red. It's a beautiful color, and garnets are usually they're gemstones, so they look like glass, or a lot of times have a deep luster to them like glass, and they have a beautiful crystal structure. So this one is a naturally growing example here in the picture that's growing out of the rock, and it grows like that with all of the planes already carved. They don't have to be cut into them. They're already formed that way, which is pretty cool.